Friday, September 29th, 2017. Monaco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. So it's a little later than usual. It's 2 p.m. London or 10 a.m. New York time. U.S. Stock market opens in half an hour, but FX markets, futures have been trading for a while. So it's still kind of an early market report. So let's get on with it. Spot gold has been doing fairly well this morning and overnight. We got up to a high of 1290.60. The low has been 1283.50. Right now we're at 1288.60, up 1.5. Silver, on the other hand, is kind of underperforming a little bit. Recently, it's been doing quite well. It's down 4 cents at 1682. Range has been 1678, 1692. The Dow down 34 points, which is really nothing. 22,340. The S&P is 2508, down 1.25. So not much activity there in the stock market. Currencies, the pound was quite a bit weaker earlier. It was down almost 100 pips. Right now it's down 40 at 134.02. So the low was 133.52. So down about 1/3%. Euro is rebounding quite well this morning. Back above 118, up 44 or 1/3%. Japanese yen, the dollar holding steady near the lows here at 112.25. The low's been 112.20 and the high 112.74. So the dollar index giving up a little bit of gains we've seen recently, is down about 0.15%, just below 93. We'd gotten back above 93, but we're now testing the 93 level in the dollar index. What else? Yeah, just a quick update on the UK economy. One of the reasons the pound was weaker this morning is that we had a second quarter GDP. I think it could have been the final numbers, and it came out at 1.5% year on year. It was expected 1.7%. So weaker year-on-year numbers there on GDP. Quarter-on-quarter was as expected 0.3%, but what matters is the 1.5%. And I would add that with the budget deficit still running probably around 3%, even 4%. If the government hadn't been running these deficits, for 7 years now, GDP would be negative, because part of the GDP calculation, as I've said before in videos, is includes government spending. And if government spends more than it takes in, that's not really growth. But anyway, what else have we had? We had some US data, core PCE price index. That came out at 1.3%, was expected 1.4%. And some personal income and spending numbers, they came out in line, so nothing really to report there. What else is going on? And, I guess today is the last day of the quarter. So from next week, it's the fourth quarter. That could be significant for the markets today, maybe some window dressing, but we'll have to see. What else? Cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, 4,200. Ethereum just below 300 here at 298. I saw a headline on Zero Hedge, I think it was a clickbaiting headline, and it said something about Ethereum tumbles after South Korea bans ICOs, margin trading. But when tumbles, and it's still around 300, and it's like down 1.34%, on the last settlement that WorldCoin index uses. So I don't know what they mean by tumbles, but anyway, the other thing I wanted to talk about is a little bit about John Exter, and I've followed John Exter for many years now, for over 10 years. And he's an interesting character, and I'll read about John Exter a little bit here. Wikipedia, he says, it says, born 1910, died 2006, was an American economist, member of the Board of Governors of the United States Federal Reserve System, and co-founder of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, or Ceylon. So interesting character. He worked also for, I think it was it Chase Manhattan Bank in the 60s. And then he left the banking world. But there's he's famous for the inverted pyramid of liquidity, the John Exter pyramid. And, he used to call the U.S. Treasuries IOU nothings, or Federal Reserve notes, because, the U.S. went off the gold standard domestically in 1933. So, and then after 1971, even, for foreign countries, the U.S. Was IOU nothing. And I've read some stories about him, like, for example, how he advised Paul Volcker back in 1971, who was at the time, I think, working for the Treasury as the U.S. Treasury, just before Nixon closed the gold window. And I think John Exter, was at the meeting with them, and Paul Volcker asked him, what should we do, because, we're going to run out of gold. And Paul Exter said, well, there's two solutions. You can either raise interest rates to defend the dollar, or you can, revalue or reset the price of gold. But actually, they ended up closing the gold window, which is not something, John Exter said you can do that, but that would be extreme. And that's what they did. And you know what happened after that. The petrodollar was created. The price of gold went through the roof back in, in the next few years, from like $35 to $850 in 1980. And I've been reading earlier today, and I'll put the link to it in the description. And it's on a website called csinvesting.org. And it's a few articles by John Butler and Barry Downs, and about John Exter. And they call him a banker for all seasons, the life and times of John Exter, champion of sound money. And one interesting thing that they talk about was back in 1980, he was in Washington, D.C., and Paul Volcker at the time was the chairman of the Federal Reserve, and he was a bit concerned because he'd been raising rates. The rates were at, 20%, and he called John Exter over for a meeting because John Exter happened to be in Washington seeing a client, or, he used to advise people. And Paul Volcker said, I can't keep, I need some advice, John Exter. I can't keep raising rates anymore. We're in a deep recession. People are complaining. They're losing their jobs. And what should I do? And apparently Paul Volcker thought that John Exter was going to say, keep raising rates, keep doing what you're doing, because he was a sound money, person and hawkish. But then John Exter actually told him, no, you've done enough, actually. You've done enough to bring confidence back in the dollar. Don't do anything. If anything, loosen up, the monetary policy. And actually, Paul Volcker did exactly that. So the guy knew what he was doing. And one thing that's interesting, and there's two articles in this, these excerpts from CS Investing. But one point he makes is that eventually, the dollar will go the way of all fiat currencies that don't have any gold backing. And he says that it will eventually happen through international markets because foreign creditors are not going to accept it anymore. And it's quite, he was right. It's taken a long time, and it's still, hasn't been, the US dollar is still the major reserve currency. But I think the way it's going to happen now is going to be in Asia, with the new market for bullion and for oil being, that are markets that are springing up, especially in China, you know, the Shanghai Gold Exchange and the Shanghai International Energy Exchange, which hasn't started trading yet. So pretty interesting. Yeah, we won't see, you know, the dollar, you know, or gold, you know, going up and the dollar collapsing from within. And by that, I mean from within the United States, because the Treasury and the Fed can always control markets in there. It's going to be internationally. And I think that's what's happening. And John Exter was right. And yeah, I recommend people just Google John Exter, inverted liquidity pyramid. And, you know, you probably guess, or maybe not, that at the bottom of the pyramid, inverted pyramid, is bullion or gold. And, you know, when he wrote about that in the 60s, we still had a gold standard internationally. But, you know, the pyramid since 1971, you know, gold looks even smaller and smaller. It's getting bigger and bigger. You know, the riskier, you know, instruments or assets or securities are all at the top. And I would probably put, you know, OTC derivatives up there. So this pyramid is much bigger now, and the you know, the base, the gold base of the pyramid is relatively small. What needs to happen is for this pyramid to become smaller on top and gold to be bigger to basically stabilize the monetary system. It will happen. We don't know when, but John Exter was right. So if you enjoyed this video, please like, share it. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do. And you can also follow me on Twitter and also on steemit.com. And I'll talk to you later. Bye.